People think losing someone happens all at once. It doesn't. Sometimes, you lose them one memory at a time. My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old. For most of my adult life, I live nearly 2,000 miles away from my hometown. A software engineer. Long hours. Endless meetings. Constant deadlines. I always told myself I was working hard to build a better future. My mom always believed me. Every Sunday evening, without fail, my phone would ring. "Hi, sweetheart. Have you eaten? Are you getting enough sleep?" The conversation was almost always the same. She'd tell me about her flowers, the neighbor's new puppy, the weather, the pie she had baked. I'd smile, half listening while answering emails. Eventually, I'd glance at the clock and say, "Sorry, Mom, I have another meeting." She never complained. She simply laughed softly. "Of course, don't work too hard. I love you. I love you too." Then I'd hang up, every single time. I promised myself I'd call her longer next week. Next week rarely came. My father had passed away 8 years earlier. Since then, Mom lived alone in the small white house where I grew up. I asked her many times to move closer to me. She always smiled. "This house still feels full." "What do you mean?" "Your father planted every tree in this yard. You took your first steps in this kitchen. I still hear laughter here. How could I leave?" At the time, I thought she was just being sentimental. Now, I understand. Some houses aren't made of wood. They're made of memories. One rainy Tuesday morning, my phone rang during a meeting. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. "Hello? Is this Daniel Carter?" "Yes. My name is Susan. I'm your mother's neighbor." Immediately, my heart sank. "Is Mom okay?" There was a brief pause. She was found 3 blocks from home. She seemed confused. She couldn't remember where she lived. The room around me disappeared. "What happened?" She kept asking people. "Have you seen my little boy?" I closed my eyes. "My little boy?" "Yes." She said he was probably scared because she couldn't find him. I couldn't breathe. I was 34 years old. Yet somewhere inside her mind, I was still 6, standing in the front yard, waiting for her to come home. I booked the first flight home. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't finish my meetings. I didn't even tell my manager why I was leaving. For the first time in years, nothing seemed more important than getting home. During the flight, I stared out the window, thinking about every phone call I'd rushed, every birthday I'd missed, every holiday I had promised to come home, but didn't. I kept telling myself, she's okay. She's just getting older. Deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. When I arrived at the hospital, Mom was sitting quietly by the window. She looked exactly the same silver hair, the same warm smile, the same gentle eyes. For one beautiful moment, I thought everything was fine. Then she looked at me. She smiled politely, the way you smile at a stranger. "Can I help you?" I forced a smile. "It's me, Mom." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've met." My entire world stopped. I knelt beside her chair. "It's Daniel, your son." She studied my face, searching, trying, wanting to remember. After several long seconds, she whispered the words that shattered my heart. "I'm so sorry. Who are you?" At that moment, I realized I hadn't lost my mother. Not yet, but I was beginning to lose the memories that connected us, and I had no idea how quickly those memories would begin to disappear. I couldn't move. My mother was looking directly into my eyes, but she saw a stranger. I forced a smile. "It's okay, Mom. You don't have to remember right now." She looked relieved. "You're very kind. Have we met before?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Many times." She smiled warmly. I wish I could remember. Those words hurt more than I could describe. Not because she had forgotten me, but because I could see how hard she was trying not to. A nurse gently touched my shoulder. "Mr. Carter, the doctor would like to speak with you." I glanced back at Mom. She had already turned toward the window, watching birds land on a tree outside, completely unaware that my heart had just broken. Dr. Reynolds greeted me with a calm expression. He had kind eyes, the kind that had delivered difficult news many times before. We sat across from each other. He folded his hands. "Your mother has undergone several cognitive tests." I nodded silently. The results are consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. The words echoed in my head. Alzheimer's. I had heard the word before, on television, in documentaries, from other families. I just never imagined it would become part of mine. The doctor continued. Right now, there will be good days and bad days. Some mornings she'll recognize everyone. Other mornings, she may not even recognize herself. I stared at the floor. Can you stop it? He slowly shook his head. We can slow the progression. We can manage the symptoms. But we can't cure it. That single sentence felt heavier than anything I had ever heard. When I returned to Mom's room, she was flipping through an old magazine. She looked up and smiled. "Oh, it's you again." I smiled back. "Yeah, it's me again." She patted the chair beside her. "Would you sit with me?" For the next hour, we talked. Or rather, she talked. She told me about a little boy she loved more than anything. He had messy brown hair. He always climbed trees. He hated broccoli. I laughed softly. "Sounds like a wonderful kid." She smiled proudly. "He was. I wonder where he is now." I looked out the window. So do I. Later that afternoon, the doctor suggested we return home. Familiar surroundings can help. So I drove Mom back to the little white house. Nothing had changed. Dad's rocking chair still sat on the porch. Wind chimes gently rang in the breeze. The rose bushes Mom loved were blooming beautifully. She smiled the moment we arrived. "Oh, I know this place." For a second, hope rushed through me. Then she quietly asked, "Do I live here?" The hope disappeared just as quickly. Inside the house, everything was exactly where she had left it. Family photos lined the hallway. Vacation pictures covered the living room shelves. My kindergarten drawings still hung on the refrigerator. Mom stopped in front of one photograph. It showed the two of us on my first day of school. She picked it up carefully. "What a handsome little boy." She smiled, then looked at me. "Is he yours?" I couldn't answer. Instead, I simply nodded. "Yes, he changed my life." She smiled. "I'm sure he loves you very much." I turned away before she could see the tears in my eyes. That evening, while Mom slept on the couch, I quietly walked through the house. Every room held another memory. The kitchen where she baked cookies every Christmas. The hallway where she measured my height every birthday. The living room where Dad taught me to play chess. I suddenly realized something. Mom wasn't the only one losing her memories. If I didn't protect these moments, one day, they would disappear with her. As I searched through an old cabinet, I found a dusty cardboard box labeled Daniel, Childhood. Inside were drawings, school report cards, birthday cards, tiny handmade crafts. At the very bottom, there was a small cassette recorder. A yellow sticky note was attached to it. In Mom's handwriting, it read, "For the days when you need to hear my voice." I stared at the recorder, confused. I had never seen it before. Slowly, I pressed the play button. Static filled the room. Then, I heard my mother's younger voice. Soft, warm, full of love. "Hello, sweetheart. If you're listening to this, it means I remembered something important before I forgot." My heart stopped. I had no idea that the recording my mother made years earlier would become the greatest gift she would ever leave me. My hands trembled as I held the old cassette recorder. The yellow sticky note was still attached. In Mom's handwriting, it read, "For the days when you need to hear my voice." I pressed play again. The tape crackled softly. Then, her voice filled the room. Young, warm, gentle. "Hello, sweetheart. If you're listening to this, then I probably forgot something." She laughed quietly. "I've always been forgetful. I lose my glasses almost every day. But if this recording exists, I'm guessing I forgot something much bigger." I felt tears forming. She had made this recording before the disease stole her memories. She continued, "I don't know what I'll remember when you hear this. Maybe I'll still know your name. Maybe I'll remember your birthday. Maybe I'll even remember your favorite pancakes." She laughed again. "The ones with too much syrup." I smiled. She always teased me about that. Then her voice became softer. "But if one day I look at you and I don't know who you are, please don't be angry. I'm not forgetting you on purpose. My heart will still know you, even if my mind can't." I paused the recording. I couldn't listen anymore. Not yet. I looked toward the living room. Mom was asleep on the couch. The same blanket Dad used to cover her with during movie nights was wrapped around her shoulders. She looked peaceful, almost like nothing had changed. If someone walked into the house, they would never guess that every day. She was losing another piece of herself. The next morning, I made breakfast. Pancakes, extra syrup, just the way she used to make them for me. The smell drifted through the house. Mom slowly walked into the kitchen. She smiled. "Oh, something smells wonderful." She sat down across from me. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. She cut her pancakes into tiny pieces, took one bite. Then, suddenly, she looked up. Her eyes widened. "I used to make these. For someone." I nodded. "You did." She frowned. "A little boy." Another nod. "Yes." She closed her eyes, trying to remember. "He always wanted more syrup." A small laugh escaped my lips. "That's true." She smiled proudly. I knew it. For one brief moment, she remembered. Not my face, not my name, just a tiny piece of our story. And somehow, that tiny memory meant everything. Over the following weeks, I moved back into my childhood home. At first, I told myself it would only be temporary, just until Mom got better. Deep inside, I already knew the truth. Alzheimer's doesn't move backward, it only moves forward. So instead of trying to stop time, I decided to spend whatever time we had left together. Every morning, we looked through old photo albums. Sometimes she'd recognize Dad. Sometimes she'd point to herself as a little girl. Sometimes she'd smile at my childhood pictures, without realizing the boy in them was me. I never corrected her. Instead, I simply asked, "What do you remember?" Because I had learned something important. It wasn't about testing her memory. It was about protecting her dignity. One afternoon, we found an old photo from my 8th birthday. Dad stood behind the camera. Mom was helping me blow out the candles. She stared at the picture for a long time. Then, without warning, she reached over and gently touched my cheek, exactly the way she used to when I was little. "You have his smile," she whispered. I froze. My sons. I couldn't breathe. For the first time since coming home, she remembered. Not my name, not who I was, but something inside her heart recognized me. I smiled through tears. "Thank you, Mom." She smiled back. "I don't know why, but being near you makes me feel safe." At that moment, I realized something incredible. Memory had begun to disappear. Recognition came and went. But love was finding a way to survive. That evening, while putting away the photo albums, I discovered another envelope hidden inside the last book. Across the front, in Mom's handwriting, were 7 simple words. "Open when I no longer know you." My heart began to race. I wasn't sure I was ready to read it, but something told me Mom had written those words for this exact moment, and inside that envelope was a truth that would completely change the way I cared for her from that day forward. I held the envelope in my hands. The words on the front wouldn't leave my mind. "Open when I no longer know you." For several minutes, I couldn't bring myself to break the seal. It felt as though Mom had reached across time to prepare me for this exact day. Finally, I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside, there were 3 handwritten pages. The first line blurred instantly through my tears. "My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, then my greatest fear has probably come true. I looked into your eyes and couldn't remember your name. If that happened, please don't let your heart break, because forgetting your face will never mean I stop loving you. Love doesn't live inside memory. Love lives much deeper than that." I paused. The room was silent except for the ticking of Dad's old clock. Mom was outside, watering flowers she had planted years ago. She smiled at each flower, as if meeting it for the first time. Somehow, they still made her happy. I continued reading. "Daniel, there may come a day when I ask the same question over and over again. Please answer me with the same kindness. Even if you've already answered 100 times. There may be days when I become frightened, days when I don't recognize my own home. Please don't argue with me. Just hold my hand. Because when memories disappear, safety becomes more important than truth." I closed my eyes. How many times had I corrected her already? No, Mom. That happened yesterday. No, Mom. Dad passed away years ago. Every correction had only confused her more. For the first time, I understood. She didn't need facts. She needed comfort. The next morning, Mom walked into the kitchen carrying her purse. I'm ready. She smiled. Ready for what? I have to pick Daniel up from elementary school. She looked at the clock. If I'm late, he'll think I forgot him. I felt my throat tighten. The old me would have reminded her that I was 34 years old. Instead, I remembered the letter, so I smiled. Don't worry, I already picked him up. She looked relieved. Oh good, I always worried about him. So did I. I answered softly. From that day forward, everything changed. I stopped trying to pull her into my reality. Instead, I stepped into hers. When she asked where Dad was, I didn't remind her that he had died. I simply said, "He's thinking about you." She smiled peacefully. I knew he would. That answer gave her comfort, and somehow, it gave me comfort too. Some afternoons, she believed she was 30 years old again. She would ask me if I had seen her husband. Other days, she thought I was one of Dad's friends from church. Once, she introduced herself to me 3 times in a single hour. Each time, I smiled. "It's nice to meet you." She laughed. "You seem like such a kind young man." Every introduction felt like saying goodbye and hello. At the same time, one rainy evening, the electricity went out. The house became completely dark. Mom suddenly panicked. "Danielle," she cried. "Where's my little boy?" I rushed toward her. "I'm right here." She grabbed my hand tightly. Her breathing slowly calmed. Then, without opening her eyes, she whispered, "I don't know your name, but I know you're the one who makes me feel safe." Tears rolled down my face. In that moment, I realized something incredible. Her mind had forgotten who I was, but her heart never had. A few days later, while organizing the attic, I found an old cassette tape labeled Daniel Alti Curious. I placed it into the recorder. Dad's voice filled the room. "Today your mom made me promise something." He laughed softly. She said if she ever forgot Daniel, I had to remind him of one thing. There was a brief pause. Then Dad smiled. "She wants him to know. Even if I forget his name, I'll still recognize the feeling of loving him." I couldn't stop crying. Mom had planned for this. Dad had helped her, years before the illness ever stole her memories. They had already been leaving little pieces of themselves behind. One recording, one letter, one message at a time. And somehow, the greatest lesson was becoming clear. Memory may fade, but love keeps finding new ways to be remembered. Little did I know, the hardest day of all was still waiting for us. Because soon, Mom would no longer recognize the house she had lived in for 40 years, and I would have to make the most painful decision of my life. A few weeks later, the phone rang again. This time, it was the local police department. My heart immediately sank. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes. We found your mother walking along Highway 17. I froze. Was she hurt? No, but she was trying to walk somewhere. She kept telling everyone, 'My little boy is waiting for me at school.' I closed my eyes. The elementary school, she remembered, had been torn down nearly 20 years ago, but inside her mind, it still existed, and she believed I was waiting there alone. When I arrived, Mom was sitting quietly in the back of a patrol car. The officer smiled kindly. She was scared, but she kept saying one thing. I looked at him. What did she say? "Please help me find my son." Those words shattered me. Even after forgetting my name, even after forgetting my face, she still remembered one thing. She was a mother, and mothers never stop looking for their children. On the drive home, Mom stared out the window. After several minutes, she softly asked, "Do you have children?" I smiled sadly. "No." She nodded. "If you ever do, never let them wonder where you are." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I won't." She smiled. "Good. Children should always feel safe." She had no idea. She was still teaching me how to live. The next morning, I installed locks higher on the doors, GPS, bracelets, motion sensors. I hid spare keys. I labeled every room in the house. The refrigerator, the bathroom, her bedroom, even the closet. anything that might help her find her way. Every change broke my heart, because each one reminded me the disease had taken another step forward. One evening, Mom stood in the hallway, looking around with frightened eyes. "This isn't my house," she whispered. I walked toward her slowly. "Yes, it is." She shook her head. "My home has blue curtains. My husband built the porch. My little boy sleeps down that hallway." Tears filled my eyes. She was describing this house 40 years ago, not today. Time had folded in her mind. Past and present had become one. That night, I barely slept. I sat alone on the porch where Dad used to drink his morning coffee. For hours, I stared at the stars, asking myself the question every caregiver eventually faces. Could I keep Mom safe here? Or was I holding on because I wasn't ready to let go? The answer terrified me. Love wasn't enough anymore. She needed care, 24 hours a day. Care I couldn't provide by myself. A few days later, I visited a memory care center. I hated every second of it. Walking through the front doors felt like betrayal. Residents smiled warmly. Some sang old songs. Others quietly looked out the windows. The staff greeted every resident by name. One elderly woman laughed as a nurse helped her paint flowers. It wasn't cold. It wasn't lonely. It was full of kindness. Yet I still couldn't imagine bringing Mom there. When I returned home, she was sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset. She smiled the moment she saw me. "Oh, there you are." I smiled back. "I'm here." She patted the empty seat beside her. We watched the sky change colors together. Without warning, she reached for my hand, then quietly asked, "Are you lonely?" The question caught me completely off guard. "I don't think so." She squeezed my hand. "Don't be. No one should carry heavy things alone." For a moment, it felt as though the illness disappeared, somewhere beneath the fading memories. The mother who had comforted me my entire life was still there. A week later, the doctor called after reviewing Mom's latest evaluation. His voice was gentle. "Daniel, I think it's time." Those 4 words echoed inside my mind. I already knew what he meant. Memory care, professional support, safety, everything my heart refused to accept. That evening, I opened the old wooden drawer beside Mom's bed, looking for insurance papers. Instead, I found another sealed envelope. Across the front, in Mom's handwriting, were the words, "Open when you think you're failing me." My hands began to shake, because that was exactly how I felt. And somehow, long before Alzheimer's ever touched her life, my mother had already known there would come a day when I needed her, even if she could no longer remember who I was. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Across the front, Mom had written, "Open when you think you're failing me." My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. It was dated almost 6 years earlier, long before her diagnosis, long before either of us knew what was coming. "My sweet Daniel, if you've opened this letter, I'm guessing you're carrying a weight that feels impossible. Maybe you're wondering if you've done enough. Maybe you're blaming yourself for something you couldn't stop. Please don't. Some storms aren't meant to be defeated. They're meant to be walked through." Together, I wiped away my tears. Already, she was comforting me, even from the past. The letter continued. "One day, you may have to make choices I never wanted you to make. Maybe you'll need help taking care of me. Maybe someone else will have to hold my hand when you can't. If that day comes, please remember something. Love is not measured by where I live. It's measured by how often you show up. Don't destroy your own life trying to save mine. I spent my whole life protecting you. Please, let me keep doing that." I couldn't breathe. The guilt I'd been carrying for weeks didn't disappear, but it became lighter. Mom had already forgiven a decision I hadn't even made yet. The following Monday, I drove her to the memory care center. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. Soft piano music played on the radio. The same songs Dad used to play every Sunday morning. Mom quietly watched the trees pass by outside the window. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They always have been." I smiled. "They really have." When we arrived, a nurse named Emily greeted us with a warm smile. She knelt beside Mom. "Hello, my name is Emily. We've been waiting for you." Mom smiled politely. "Have we met?" "Not yet," Emily replied. but I hope we'll become friends." There was something comforting about the way she said it. No pity, no sadness, just kindness. Emily showed Mom around the garden. There were roses, bird feeders, a small walking path, even a wooden bench overlooking a tiny pond. Mom stopped beside the flowers. "They smell just like mine." She smiled. "I used to have roses." Emily gently answered, "I think you'll like these too." As Mom explored the garden, the director quietly spoke with me. "Most families feel guilty," she said softly. "They think bringing someone here means giving up." I looked toward Mom. I promised I'd take care of her. The director nodded. "And you still are. You're choosing the place where she'll be safest." That's love, not convenience, not abandonment. Love. Before I left, Mom and I sat together on the garden bench. The afternoon sun warmed our faces. She reached over and straightened my shirt collar, exactly the way she had before every first day of school. "You look tired," she said. I laughed quietly. "I didn't sleep much. You should rest." She smiled. "Your mother would worry." I felt my throat tighten. "I know." She gently touched my cheek. For just a second, her eyes became perfectly clear. She looked directly at me, not through me, at me. Then she whispered, "Daniel." I froze. She remembered. Just for a moment. My little boy. Tears streamed down my face. "I'm here, Mom." She smiled. "I know. I've always known." Then, as quickly as it came, the moment was gone. She looked around in confusion. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" I nodded through my tears. "Yes, you do. Somewhere deep inside. You always will." I visited every single day. Some days, she thought I was her son. Some days, she thought I was a kind neighbor. Once, she introduced me to another resident as her favorite teacher. I never corrected her, because I finally understood. She didn't need perfect memories. She needed familiar love. One rainy afternoon, Emily handed me a small notebook. "We found this in your mother's room." Across the cover, in Mom's handwriting, were 4 simple words, things I never want forgotten. I slowly opened the first page. Instead of memories, there was a list. Not of places, not of birthdays, not of names. The first sentence read, "If I forget who my son is, please remind him that he was always the best thing that ever happened to me." I covered my face and cried. Not because Mom was disappearing, but because, even while preparing to lose her memories, she had spent her remaining strength, making sure I would never lose her love. And that notebook would become the greatest gift she ever left behind. I couldn't stop looking at the notebook. Across the first page, Mom had written, "If I forget who my son is, please remind him that he was always the best thing that ever happened to me." The words blurred through my tears. For years, I thought I would be the one protecting her memories. Instead, she had spent years protecting mine. Emily quietly sat beside me. "Your mother wrote in that notebook almost every night." I looked up. "Even after her diagnosis?" She nodded. "Whenever she had a clear day, she was afraid she'd forget important things. So she wrote them down." I gently turned the page. The next entry read, "To whoever is reading this, if you're taking care of me, thank you. I know it isn't easy. Please remember, the woman you're helping today once stayed awake all night when her little boy had a fever. Once worked 2 jobs so he could go to college. Once laughed until she cried watching old cartoons with him. If I seem difficult, please don't judge me by my worst day. Remember me by my best years." I closed the notebook for a moment. Every caregiver should hear those words. Not just me. The following afternoon, I brought one of Mom's old photo albums to the care center. We sat together in the garden. The roses were beginning to bloom. Birds sang from the trees overhead. I opened the album. "Would you like to see some pictures?" She smiled. "I'd love that." The first photo showed Dad holding me as a newborn. Mom looked at it for a long time. "He looks like a good father." "He was," I answered. She smiled. "The baby was lucky." I whispered. "He really was." Page after page. We looked through our family's life. Christmas mornings, camping trips, my high school graduation, Dad teaching me how to drive. Sometimes Mom remembered tiny details. "Oh, that blue dress was my favorite." Or, Your father always burned the hamburgers. We both laughed. Those little memories felt like precious gifts, appearing, then disappearing again. Suddenly, she stopped on one photograph. It showed me at age 12, standing beside my bicycle. She gently traced the picture with her finger. Without looking at me, she quietly asked, "Is this your son?" I nodded. "Yes." She smiled. "He has kind eyes." Then she looked at me. "So do you." For a second, it didn't matter that she didn't know I was the boy in the picture. She still saw something good in me, just like she always had. That evening, Emily approached me before I left. "Daniel, there's something you should know." I felt my stomach tighten. "What is it?" "Your mother's memory is changing faster now. There may soon come a day when she doesn't recognize this place either." I looked toward Mom's room. She was peacefully humming an old lullaby, the same one she used to sing every night when I was little. Even now, she remembered the melody, though she no longer remembered why. Over the next several weeks, her world grew smaller. She forgot how to use a spoon. She forgot which room was hers. Sometimes, she forgot how to tie her shoes. But one thing never changed. Every afternoon, at exactly 4 o'clock, she walked to the front window and waited. Emily finally asked her, "Who are you waiting for?" Mom smiled. "My little boy. When he gets off school. I don't want him coming home to an empty room." Emily told me later. Everyone on the staff cried, because they finally understood. Even when memory disappeared, motherhood remained. One rainy Sunday, I arrived later than usual. Traffic had delayed me nearly an hour. The moment I walked inside, Emily hurried over. She's been worried. Mom was sitting by the window, looking out at the rain. The second she saw me, her face lit up. "There you are," she whispered. "I was afraid you'd have to walk home in the storm." I knelt beside her. "I'm safe." She gently brushed a strand of hair away from my forehead, just like she had done when I was a child. Good. I couldn't stop worrying. In Hemin, I was still 10 years old, walking home from school, and she was still waiting by the window, making sure I got home safely. Some instincts never fought. Before I left that evening, Emily handed me another folded note. We found this tucked inside the notebook. Across the front, Mom had written, "Read this after my favorite song plays one last time." I looked at Emily. "My favorite song?" She smiled sadly. "Every night before bed, we play the same old record. It's the only thing that still calms her." I carefully placed the note in my pocket. Something told me that day was coming sooner than I wanted to believe. And somehow, my mother's final goodbye had already been waiting for me all along. The folded note stayed in my jacket pocket for 3 days. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Somehow, as long as it remained sealed, I could pretend there was still time. Time for one more conversation, one more smile, one more day. But deep inside, I knew Alzheimer's wasn't waiting for either of us. Every evening at exactly 7 o'clock, the nurses played the same vinyl record. It was an old song my parents used to dance to in the living room. Whenever the music began, something extraordinary happened. Mom would stop whatever she was doing. Her eyes would slowly close, and she would gently hum every single note. Not every word, not every lyric, just the melody. The disease had erased birthdays, addresses, names, faces, but somehow, it couldn't erase music. Emily smiled one evening. "It's amazing, isn't it?" I nodded. It's like her heart remembers, even when her mind doesn't. One Friday afternoon, I arrived carrying fresh roses from her old garden. The room felt unusually quiet. Mom was sitting by the window, staring at the birds outside. She didn't turn when I walked in. "Hi, Mom." No response. I gently touched her shoulder. She slowly looked at me. Her eyes were calm, peaceful, but empty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't think I've ever met you." This time, there wasn't even a flicker of recognition. Not my voice, not my smile, not my touch. For the first time, I realized she had reached a place where memories could no longer guide her home. That evening, 7 o'clock arrived. Emily placed the old record onto the turntable. The familiar piano filled the room. Every resident became quiet. Mom closed her eyes, just as she always did. For a moment, everything felt normal. She softly hummed along. Then, halfway through the song, She suddenly stopped. The humming disappeared. Her eyes slowly opened. She looked around the room, as though she had never heard the melody before. Emily lowered her head. I felt my heart sink. The final song she remembered had faded away. Later that night, after Mom had fallen asleep, I finally opened the folded note. Her handwriting was weaker than before, but every word was still unmistakably hers. My precious Daniel, if you're reading this, then maybe my favorite song no longer brings me back. And that's okay. Music has carried me as far as it could. Now, you'll have to carry the memories for both of us. Please don't remember me only as the woman in the hospital bed. Remember the mother who danced barefoot in the kitchen, who laughed too loudly at your silly jokes, who kissed your forehead before every school exam, who believed you could do anything, because that's who I really am. Not this illness. Never this illness. I could barely continue. Tears rolled onto the paper. The ink blurred beneath my fingers. The letter went on. One day, there will be a moment when I leave this world. Please don't be standing there thinking about everything Alzheimer's took from us. Instead, think about everything love gave us. 34 beautiful years of memories cannot be erased by a few difficult ones. Promise me something. When you see another family walking this same road, be kind to them, because no one understands this goodbye until they've lived it. I folded the letter carefully, holding it against my chest. Mom had spent years preparing me, not for her death, but for how to keep living afterward. The next morning, Emily met me at the entrance. She smiled sadly. She slept peacefully. I nodded. How is she today? Emily hesitated. She hasn't spoken since yesterday. My heart tightened. When I entered the room, Mom was resting quietly. Sunlight streamed through the window. Her breathing was slow, gentle. I sat beside her, took her hand. It felt smaller than I remembered. The same hand that had held mine crossing busy streets. The same hand that had bandaged, scraped knees. The same hand that had waved goodbye every time I left for college. I leaned close and whispered, "I love you, Mom." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, without opening her eyes, her finger softly squeezed mine, just once. A tiny movement, almost impossible to notice. But I felt it. It was her answer. The last conversation we would ever have, without a single word. As the sun slowly set beyond the window, I realized tomorrow would change my life forever, because the greatest goodbye was only one sunrise away. The next morning, my phone rang at 5:42 a.m. I didn't need to answer. Somehow, I already knew. When I arrived at the care center, the hallways were quiet. The world outside was just beginning to wake up. Emily was waiting for me. She gently wrapped her arms around me. "I'm so sorry, Daniel." I nodded, unable to speak. Mom had passed away peacefully in her sleep. There had been no fear, no pain, only quiet, just as she had always hoped. I walked slowly into her room. Sunlight spilled across the bed. Everything looked exactly the same. Her favorite sweater hung on the chair. The small vase of roses I had brought a few days earlier still sat by the window. She looked peaceful, as if she were simply taking one last nap. I sat beside her, held her hand one final time. It was cold now, but somehow, it still felt familiar. I kissed her forehead, just like she had kissed mine every night before bed when I was a little boy. Then I whispered, "You remembered how to love me, even when you couldn't remember my name. Thank you for being my mom." The funeral was held 1 week later. Friends, neighbors, former co-workers, people I hadn't seen in years, they all came. Not because Mom had been famous, not because she had been wealthy, because she had spent her life making people feel loved. They shared stories, how she brought soup when someone was sick, how she never forgot a birthday, how every child in the neighborhood called her Mom. Listening to them, I realized something. Alzheimer's had taken her memories, but it couldn't erase the memories she had created in other people's hearts. After the service, Emily walked over to me. She handed me one final envelope. "We found this in your mother's bedside drawer." It had your name on it. Across the front, Mom had written, "Open after I'm gone." I waited until that evening, back at the old family house. I sat on Dad's rocking chair, the same place where Mom used to wave goodbye every time I left for college. Then, I opened the letter. "My dearest Daniel, If you're reading this, then my journey is over. Please don't spend too much time missing me. Instead, spend your time loving people the way I tried to love you. Call your friends, visit your family, forgive quickly, laugh often, take too many pictures, and never leave without saying, I love you, because one day, those 3 words will become someone's favorite memory. I stopped reading. The tears came faster than ever. But this time, they weren't only tears of grief, they were tears of gratitude, because I had been loved, completely, unconditionally, for my entire life. Months passed. I couldn't bring myself to sell the house. Instead, I turned one of the bedrooms into a small reading room. On the shelves, I placed Mom's letters, Dad's photographs, the cassette recorder, the notebook titled, Things I Never Want Forgotten. Then I started something new. Once a month, I invited families caring for loved ones with Alzheimer's to the house. We shared coffee, stories, tears, hope. Sometimes, people cried because they felt exhausted. Sometimes, they smiled because someone finally understood. Before they left, I always handed them a copy of one page from Mom's notebook, the page that had changed my life. It simply read, Don't remember me by the days I forgot you. Remember me by the lifetime I loved you. Every family who read it cried. Every single one. One spring afternoon, a little girl visited with her grandfather. She couldn't have been older than 7. She looked at an old photograph of Mom holding me as a child. Then she asked, Did your mommy love you? I smiled. More than anything. She thought for a moment. Even when she forgot, I looked at the picture, then up at the blue sky outside, especially then, because love isn't stored in memory. It's written into the heart, and the heart remembers far longer than the mind ever can. If this story reminds you of someone you love, don't wait until tomorrow. Call your mom, call your dad, visit your grandparents, hug your children, tell your brother you forgive him, tell your sister you miss her, because memories are precious, but time is priceless. And in the end, the greatest gift my mother ever gave me wasn't perfect memories. It was teaching me that real love doesn't disappear when memories fade. It simply finds another way to say, I'm still here,